Hey everyone, this is Asia from Honey Love Connections, and welcome to Tell Me Something About Love, an interview series for QT BIPOC folks to share their love stories, to talk about their relationships with themselves, with each other, with their work, or just with the world. I'm really excited to be here with Daniel and Ignacio today, who I will pass the mic to them to introduce themselves. So if you both could say a bit about who you are, what you want people to know about you, who you are in this moment, and also if you could introduce your relationship and how you're relating to each other.
I'm Daniel Coleman. I use he and they pronouns. I am an artist scholar, an activist, and a trans masc, non-binary, queer, independent polyamorous person. I currently teach women's gender and sexuality studies, and my work very much centers around movement and movement healing for trans people of color in particular. And I'm really interested in building connections between Black and Brown people, between the US South, Mexican South, and other locations. And how do you relate? Ignacio is my partner. And I thought I was going to explain more after you yourself. I'm Ignacio Rivera. I use they, them pronouns. I identify as a gender fluid being. I strongly identify as a mother, and I am the founder and executive director of the HEAL Project. And this is like my life's work around sexual liberation for queer, trans, non-binary, people of color, but in particular, survivors of sexual abuse and child sexual abuse in particular. So talking about sexual liberation and healing the wounds of our ancestors and healing a lot of pain through sexual violence. So that's where my heart lies. That's my heart work. I'm also a performance artist who has not been on the stage for a while. I miss it. But that's also a love of mine, creativity, writer. Yeah, I'm very, very much interested, and I talk about this incessantly, is how humans connect to one another. So I love that we're here talking about this. And the way I relate to Daniel is he's my partner, and it's a word that we came to together to describe one another. I'm also an independent polyamorous person, and I could say a little bit more about that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for those introductions. And sure, please say a little bit more about that, about it being an independent polyamorous person and how you both came to those parts of your identities and how the two of you came together.
Love story. I think this has been a long journey for me. You know, it's been a beautiful journey. I have identified as polyamorous for probably more than 20 years now. And when I first identified as polyamorous, I pretty much went into what was being talked about mostly at the time, which was having a primary partner and then going from there. So I kind of fell into that, feeling that was the only way to go. And through that journey, I found and I started exploring primary partnership. I explored being in triads and quads. I dabbled and just tried to discover what was like the best for me. And one of the things I discovered was that having a primary partner doesn't work in the traditional sense, in the ways in which we replicate monogamy, kind of a escalator kind of thing. And so I didn't want that. And independent polyamory speaks to me because I know that some people identify solo poly, but for me, it's like solo still indicates that you're alone. And there's like, almost like you're alone until you find someone. And independent polyamory for me means that, you know, I can be polyamorous completely by myself with many people, but that I'm putting more attention. Maybe the hierarchy is me. That the relationship to myself is the most important, which took a very long time to get to.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I'm younger, so I have a less amount of time identifying as polyamorous for that reason. But I first came out as polyamorous when I was 24. And that was after being married, identifying as a cis woman for a very brief period of my life. Got married, and within 6 months of getting married, came out as a lesbian. Ruining my family's hope of me being this, being the good family woman. I was teaching middle school. I mean, I was doing all the things, and then I was like, fuck this life. I don't like this life at all. I'm gonna die. I felt completely suffocated by everything that marriage represents, by that way of building a life. By the idea of being like a family person with children. I was like, there's nothing about this that's me. So it was like a downward spiral into really politicizing my queerness and understanding queerness not only as sexuality and gender, but also as a ways of connecting and relating. And when I first realized that I could deeply love more than one person at a time, but I wasn't necessarily with people who were okay with that. And they saw that as harmful. And so I went through a period of years of like, there's something wrong with me, there's something wrong with me. And always coming back to the conclusion that like, I'm not monogamous, and I've never successfully been monogamous when I've tried to be monogamous with people. And I also don't like the relationship escalator. And as soon as those things start to happen, I'm done.
Yeah.
So, I have no intention of ever sharing a home with anyone ever again. And that feels absolutely wonderful.
Yes.
I love visiting and having, loves here. That's different. But this is my space. And that's really, really crucial to me. And also I shifted from solo to independent polyamory as a language after being with Ignacio, because I really like what they said about, I don't see this as like, and then, like I meet you and then that's it, over. Now this is, now I'm going to close in around you.
Yeah, this is the funny thing too, because everybody knows that I'm independent poly. I've been an independent polyamorous person for at least the last decade or more, but I've been polyamorous for 20 years. And so when I said I'm in a relationship with this person and I am like deeply in love right now, everyone's reaction was that I wasn't independent poly anymore. That almost like to love as deeply as I was describing does not correlate with independent polyamory. And so they were like, really? So what's going on? So what's the thing? And I'm like, everything's still the same. I'm just in love, But they thought that, like what was going to happen? Was I going to move in with him, or was I going to do this? And so I was like, really interesting that it automatically goes to what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
That is.
Mm-hmm.
That's really strange. I mean, just to be like, you're saying that for 20 years, like everybody knows this about you. And then you get into a relationship, within the expansiveness of who you are and how you identify. And still there's an assumption that it just like usurps everything that you are and it turns back into this expected thing. It's like just interesting how automatic it is for us to like assume that one way.
Well, I think it's a lot about the love thing. That's something that's occurred over and over and over. This idea of love, like, love is very subjective. I believe that there's no one way of loving, but in these contexts of like being polyamorous and trying to love other people, the constant conversation of like, how is this love? How is this love different? Or how can you describe this as love? And so it's interesting because to me, some of the ways that some of the people saw love was very much rooted in like, heteronormativity and, in a year we'll be married or something, like these ways, which I totally do not down at all. Like, I don't have any bad thing to say about monogamy or anything like that. If that is what people love and they feel at home in a monogamous relationship, and I'm like, oh, I say be intentional in any relationship that you're in, period. Like, you can be intentional in a relationship. So, but that's just not my jam. Like, it's not my jam. And so it's always, it's kind of this way of whether people do it consciously or unconsciously, this idea that at some point it'll get out of my system. And that's been the case for a lot of times. At some point it'll change. It'll just get out of my system, and I'm not going to want on this. And what's confusing, I think, too, is that when I have loved people and really loved them, and when I say love, I mean like care for them and was there for them in deep ways, I think that was confusing because they could not correlate that deep love with me wanting my independence. It was, you love me this much? Well, then you're going to, I'm sure we're going to the next step. And then when I say, no, then it's like a shock. They're like, how? Then I don't understand what love is. Then. Yeah. I don't understand it.
Yeah. I think that's been a big piece for me too. Love, even people who are, when I would like question them on the level of possession that I felt, it was an affront to them. Because I'm like, well, your idea of possession and mine are very different then, because I've been fiercely independent since the jump. Like, it's an integral part of my personality, who I am, my spiritual path. And I need to be able to center that. I need to be able to say, like, spiritually, this is part of what I need to do in this life. And to not have someone be like, but what about me? Why are you not, making me part of all of your plans? I'm like, well, that's not realistic, and that's not necessarily part of your path. So, and really wanting that level of freedom. And I think people thought like, well, you're just not very loving then, are you? Right? Or it becomes this, like, it's automatically equated with selfishness. And it's like, actually from this place with this level of freedom and independence is where I can feel the most committed to anyone.
That's what I say.
Yeah.
The more I am at the closest that I can be to myself and the freedom that I have. And it is like the most, I'm like, I have the capacity to go beyond this level of love and care and like seeing you, like just seeing a person in a different way. Yeah. But when it's stifling,
yeah. I think what Ignacio is saying about people who are like, well, what does it mean that you two are in love? It's like, well, because we share a sensibility about relationships. Right. And so it's like, finally, like not contradicting, or people who are like, we set it up like this, but then once you really start developing feelings, like, well, maybe we can move in together and maybe we can, and it's like, no. That's the whole point. And that's what actually breeds it's a commitment that I think people aren't used to thinking about as commitment.
Yeah. Well, it's a little funny, but we actually like organically fell into this little ritual ceremony once where like we just like was looking into each other's eyes and being like, I promise never to want to live with you.
We made these vows.
Like, I promise never to want to share a bank account with you. I promise.
Love that.
And again, that works for us. Like, to me, that feels more secure. For somebody else, it might feel like joining our finances feels very secure. And that's somebody else's, reality. For me, it feels safer for me to have, hands in my own stuff, live in my own place, share what I want to share. And when I'm able to be myself, I actually want to share more of myself because I'm able to be me.
Yeah, that's really lovely. It's interesting to hear you both, excuse me, talk about just how much freedom you feel like when you're able to be yourself and love in the way that you want to love. And it seems like maybe both of you have had some experience in the past with people who don't quite, who it still, want to do the escalator thing. But now that you two have found each other. Like, what's it like? What does this feel like to have met someone who shares the same, desire and innate capacity to love so deeply, and also to live freely and to feel safer in that way too?
I feel like it is opened up another level in my relationship capacity. And when I talk about this publicly, I always want to just reiterate and say that this in no way, shape, or form says that my old relationships are horrible.
Yeah.
And that I didn't like them or anything. Yeah. I actually loved a lot of my relationships. I learned so much from them. I still love the people that I was in a relationship with, even though it did not work out. The only thing that means is that we were not a match. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So no downing anybody. I learned a lot about myself. I fucked up in relationships. People have fucked up in relationships, and I'm here as a better person because of it. So I say that straight off, And I would say that because we talk about this a lot in terms of relationships, like, as a person who's been poly, as a person who is a sex educator that talks about relationships and communication all the time, right? And as an out survivor of, sexual violence and stuff, I talk about this all the time. And when I'm in relationship with people, or in the past, when I have been in relationship with people, because of my survivorship, my issues around safety and fear, I think I tended to partner with people that I felt the most safe with. And those people tended to be more of my friends in the end, and not a match in what I needed in my, my emotional capacity, right? And so in that sense, what I ended up doing was taking a lot of time to be facilitator and educator, befriend, right? Rather than having the time for me. So in this relationship, the big difference is I am finally with an equal. Again, not downing someone else, but in the ways that we have our ethics, the way we see relationships, our values, is just so in alignment. I am with my equal. And now that we are here and we agree on so many of the things, there's no facilitating. There's no navigating. There's no bullshit, really. There's basically, we just are. And this is what we're saying, our relationship just is, because now we're actually taking the steps and living our independent poly life while we are loving each other and moving forward with our independent poly lives as we are growing and loving each other, which is beautiful. That's why I think I'm like in another area, because now I'm here saying, I'm reevaluating, what do I want? What do I want now? Because I've been so worried about other people, my own shit, nobody else's. That's codependency, working on that, working on other people's stuff, that I haven't had a chance to really like sit with myself and say, what is it that I want right now? Like right now. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, ooh, this is fun. We're like having so much fun talking about all the possibilities of so many things. Mm-hmm. So it's just, bullshit out of the way and loveliness.
I love what Ignacio said about past relationships, and I would say that too. Like, I've loved people very, very deeply, and I've had relationships that have really changed my life in a lot of ways over time. And I think a lot of my relationships have been quite short term because of the lack of alignment. And I've definitely fucked up. I've fucked up in being poly many times. I feel like it took me a while to really mature and be like, okay, this is who I am, and this is unwavering. And I need to call in people who are in alignment, and nothing less than that, because it's just going to be either harmful to them or harmful to me, or both. And I'm tired of patterns and cycles. And so I had to really put an end to a lot of that, which was a lot of therapy and a lot of spiritual work and offerings and talking to ancestors, and, and really reevaluating, like, who am I in relationships and what have I done wrong? And how do I stop doing that wrong? Because it's me,
Always. That's what I would say. It's always that. It's like common denominator.
Yeah.
What are you working on?
Yeah. And so now it feels, and so I was really, like, even before we got together, I was really at this place where I was like, okay, either I'm going to like really truly start calling in alignment, or I'm going to be alone.
We got out the little fight.
And I was like resigning myself to that. Like, okay, I'm just going to be a fully independent person, and I'm good with that. And, you know, I'm just going to live my life and maybe have lovers here and there. And like, that's it. Yeah. And I was like, but you don't want that. That is not, I was like, no, you enjoy love, you love connection. Your whole life revolves around relationships. All of your work revolves around relationships. What are you talking about? So now it's really like, okay, I also feel like I'm getting to experience my capacity for love, which has always been vast. And I think has been really demonized in a lot of ways, where it's like, no, I love you and I love you too. You know, like, it's okay. Like, it's not taking anything away from anyone. It's actually something I can hold. And it's not a threat, and it's not, you know, and so I also love that we're getting to experience the intensity of our connection for what it is. And it's not, there's, you know, I know I was definitely I had to really unlearn everything I learned as a child, which is like, you find the one, you know, and you get married and you have children, and then you struggle because relationships are hard and love is suffering. You make sacrifices.
You do make sacrifices.
You know, I was like, nah, you know, like, and so I don't believe in that model of relationship. And it's like, I believe that we journey with people because of spiritual and emotional evolution. And we journey with people as long as it makes sense. So now it's like, I get to breathe. I don't feel this sense of like, oh, this relationship has a timestamp, right? Which is something I always felt.
Yes.
Because of intuition, because of spiritual stuff. And then it was really hard to deeply invest in someone, because I was like, this isn't going to last very long. And then there was this like a deep attachment to me. And I was like, this is not. And then I kept feeling like bad. I was like, I can't keep doing this. You know? Yeah. So this is like, it's freed up all this space to be like, okay, let's just enjoy and be present and see all the things we get to learn and explore. You know, all the other stuff. Yes.
Yeah. This is so like juicy to me. It's kind of hard because I have like so many questions, and I'm like, there's so many things, but I really appreciate you both naming your own ways that you've messed up in relationships. I think that like that's hard for a lot of us to admit, you know, how we harm or how we make mistakes and show up in relationships imperfectly. But it sounds like that acknowledgement to yourself and also to other people, even like on this public thing right now, sharing that is really important to opening up more discovery and like getting to a place where you can let go of whatever shame or whatever things that aren't actually aligned and actually call in things that are. And Daniel, you just said that you feel like people are in relationship for spiritual and emotional evolution. So I'm curious for both of you, like, what would you say that you as individuals and you know, together, what are you two evolving into right now? Like, how is this relationship supporting your evolution and transformation?
I was talking about this. I feel like it's like multi-layered about how this is helping to like evolve me as a person, and that is very much intertwined, like spiritually. Like it doesn't separate. Right? And that is, first of all, Daniel and I are very inquisitive people. We're constantly thinking, constantly. So we philosophize a lot. We talk about things, which I love. And so we're constantly visioning. We're visioning and just thinking about what a future could look like if. And that always comes around with the ways in which we love, transness, non-binaryism, like all of these things, like what if? And I think definitely it has lifted my my vibration very, very high. I'm a anxious and depressed person, and being in this, it's just like being in positivity. Like I'm not having to worry constantly about what he's thinking or what he wants or anything, because we just say it. We're just really like, this is radically honest. We just say the things, and I'm like, yeah, this is the way it should be. So it opens up so much, in like, even in the vision, I think it's like so much possibility. And I'm constantly thinking about like future wise, in terms of like how we share what we're currently working on, and how the work that we're doing is a part of really a bigger world, but also like how we connect. Like I do work on, sexual liberation, and he does work on like, trans bodies and movement and healing, and how those two intertwine. Just feels like constant growth. I'm always excited. I'm always excited about what new. And that also includes what new in terms of who is going to come into Daniel's life. Am I going to have a metamor? Vice versa. Mm-hmm. Like all of that includes a life with other people as well. So I think that growth for me is the possibility of coexisting with people who just want to love and care for one another in a very intentional way. And I think that vision has always been beautiful to me. And so with you, that possibility, it's more than a possibility. Like I can see that happen. And that's something that I've always wanted.
There's also like, I love that our relationship began not from like, we both experienced what it's like to be a public person in different ways and do. And that was not how we approached each other at all. It was not like, oh, you are so-and-so. It was like, no, it was like, oh, there's a connection here, because I think we both hate that sort of like celebrity and, pedestals. And so within that and that way of, because that's how our connection started, that's how it is. And it's allowing us to explore aspects of vulnerability that I think have been really difficult for both of us.
Because, you hit it right on the head, right there. Yes.
Because I think we have both historically been people who other folks place in more dominant roles, whether we've wanted that or not. And so
you said other folks put you in more dominant roles?
Yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
And now that's not either a gendered expectation or an energetic expectation. Right. And also part of our play explores that.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, there's all of these emotional things that are getting cracked open.
Yeah.
And our opportunities for tremendous growth that we can have together without all of the other sort of baggage that might cover up opportunities to be vulnerable, that I think we've both recognized in ourselves, that even the type of power we may have had in other relationships was a way to not have to be that vulnerable.
Exactly. That's what I say. I was like, those are the people I was with, because then they wouldn't allow me to be as vulnerable as I could be. And now I'm tapping into some shit. Woo. It's like, this is real vulnerability here. This is like, just crack my fucking chest wide open and like see all of me, and let me fall into a puddle, but be okay with it. And it's been that. I mean, to me, that's the shit that I want to see. That's the realness. I'm constantly thinking about, not about what next. To me, it's what about how are we caring for one another? Mm-hmm. How are we good to one another? How do we show up for one another? What are we learning from one another? Like, I'm constantly asking these questions and not just because, I mean, for me too, because I'm like, am I being a good friend? I'm always like, am I being a good friend? Am I being an asshole? Like, am I constantly like checking in and stuff? And it's all about the different ways we're able to be in connection with other people. And I think because of the foundation that we created, I mean, we created a sturdy foundation, like from the beginning. It feels like there's so much spaciousness, to not be so afraid. I mean, really, not be so afraid.
What would y'all say are the practices or the conditions that helped you to establish that foundation where there is so much room for vulnerability or a different level of vulnerability?
Well, one thing that was really important for us was there are no rules. So outside of respecting one another, we each own our bodies and have no say over what the other person does with their body, and with who. And that's emotional, spiritual, sexual, but always about, of course, safety, respect. So there's no such thing as like veto power or any of those other things that can get complicated with certain, because there's so many different ways to be polyamorous, right? So
I also think like this, that we accepting, like really owning and saying to one another, I am a slut. I am a whore. And you're going to, if you love me, you love a slut. Someone who likes to play around with sex and talk about sex and experiment with things and, go to play parties if ever COVID is, but all of these things. And I don't like to hide that of me. That definitely doesn't mean that I'm having sex every single day. It could mean that, doesn't matter, right? But it's the point that's a possibility. That I have those desires and they're there. And we talked extensively about our whorishness, which I loved.
Which is not something a lot of people know about me.
Well, they know now.
But I think when I say Scorpio, people are like,
I thought. So when you said Scorpio, I was like,
what else? I think the clarity on there's no relationship escalator, right? So that means we don't desire to live together, and that's not going to change. We will never share finances, and that we will love each other as long as it makes sense.
Yeah.
And so as long as it's not painful or harmful, we will keep on keeping on. There's no like proposed timeline. So then there's no markers of what the relationship would look like at this point, and on this point, on this point, or where there's no measurement in that way. And so our future, when we talk about visioning futures, it's like, how do we support each other and what we are here to do in this lifetime? And when there are points that can overlap, intersect, collaborate, fantastic. That's not required. So we don't, what we've talked about, it would be wonderful to live in the same place. And it may or may not happen.
Or the same state even. That's great.
Yeah. But also, we're going with like what makes sense for our lives, our careers, our work, all of that. It's not like I'm going to make all these decisions based on you. Yeah.
And I also think the conversations about, what we actually want and desire sexually.
Yes. That was major.
That was super major.
Yeah.
Because we identify as two switches. Like we always say, real switches.
Yes.
Real switches.
Right. For real. Not just to talk.
It's like we can't decide what we like best, topping or bottom.
Wait, do people lie about being switches?
Well, I mean, I think people can be switches, but sometimes you lean more towards them, sometimes, and that's nothing wrong with that, But we are like, we like equally is like so good,
And I think that estimate what it really means to switch, and some people can top but don't know how to be dominant. And I think that's another thing, the important separation.
Yeah, talking a lot about so like the ways in which sometimes we were put into again positions of dominance, and I understood that. I'm a sex educator, blah blah blah. So it just for sometimes, and because of me feeling fearful and feeling safer being a top, let's not get it twisted. That was easier for me to do, right? So I could tap into my dominance anytime. And then submission a little different. And I have tapped into submission, but now it's like another level of the submission, because it's also sharing the fantasies, the deep fantasies that you don't tell people about,
So, as a person observing me and other people who might be watching, I would kind of see you both seem like practiced, and like skilled at having these types of conversations about what you desire, about your relational style, just being honest about things like that. What would you say what do people need to do in order to get to this point of being able to be so like radically honest and vulnerable and communicative with partners about sexual needs and desires, about relational style, like about all of these things? Like, what would you offer to people who are curious?
So many things. Okay. I think I would say first off, like, you're never fully there.
No.
If you understand that, you're always understanding that you're working on it. Like, as long as you're breathing, you will be journeying through whatever your sexual liberation means to you, whatever. And so it's trial and error. Like I said, I've had over 20 years of refining this. So I had a lot of fuck ups. I, did things wrong. I've hurt people's feelings, vice versa. But the consistent thing for me, and I say this all the time, is being in relationship with other people has much to do with being in relationship with yourself. So that is taking inventory constantly, not only about past romantic relationships, but friendships. And if ever you have an opportunity to ask old friends what they think about you, what they loved about you and what they did not like about you, exes that are willing to tell you that, you really learn a lot about yourself. You might not want to hear it, but you really fucking learn a lot about yourself, because the only constant in relationships that continue to go, south is you. And that doesn't mean that we're fucked up. It just means that we have to work on something, right? And most of us are working on shit that we are dealing with from our childhood, our family of origin, some trauma. So it's not easy. It's not easy. I think it just takes a lot of time and a lot of self-reflection, accompanied by very good friends that see and know you, because those are the people that are going to tell you about yourself, so nobody else will.
I think a big piece for me too has been thinking about what were the relational models that I saw growing up that really formed what I thought relationships should be. And I love that word inventory, because I've been in serious domestic violence situations, also a survivor of sexual abuse and a lot of emotional abuse from various places. And so, it was like, okay, I had to really understand that I was choosing relationships and people, sometimes out of Stockholm syndrome, and sometimes out of wanting to repeat abuse. I kept attracting that and drawing it to myself because I hadn't done the work, and then, and I kept asking myself, like, why am I with these people that are so terrible to me? Like, what is happening? It's like, oh, I have not done deep enough healing. And so I'm not clear about first of all, what I deserve, and then also what I want, what I desire. And I think the sexual piece is so, I'm obsessed with like derailing and decentering the Christian supremacy of this country. The assumption that like the world is Christian, and the colonial lie of that, and we are not in a secular country, right? And I think that's one of our biggest fallacies. And so we were entrenched in a white supremacist, moralist, Victorian culture around sex and bodies. And so, you know, and like I'm in an Afrocentric spiritual tradition that does not have any of those ideas around sex or anything. So really, I've had to and continue to be constantly in the process of like decolonizing my body, my sex, and really just as someone who understood themselves as very sexual quite young, and wanting to be free in that, like, oh, the goal is constantly liberation, like, and that is a lifelong goal. And so I am not invested in policing my own body, my desires, my fantasies, or those of anyone else.
Yes.
And when I can be in that place as a constant practice and constantly undoing anything that might remain around like shame or whatever, then from that place, I can communicate all sorts of things, but also even be able to communicate like, I feel weird about this, or like, right. I'm not sure how you're going to think about me if I say it. Right? Actually being able to give that, like, let me give this preface and see how this goes. And also constantly knowing that, like, that is I like to think that we are always like students of our bodies. And I think that our bodies hold so much wisdom and knowledge and information. And part of our goal, and I think something we work on a lot together because we're very heady people, is to get out of our fucking head. Yes. You know, and be like, what does the body know? What does the body want? And that instinctual, like my body wants this. That's the first thing that comes up. So that's what you should go with. Right?
Thank you. Thanks for those responses. I'm just ask a couple more questions. And what you just said, Daniel, about like getting into the body, and you opened up saying that you were, did you say a movement healer?
Yeah.
Is that a part of one of your identities?
Yeah. I'm going to claim this. Thank you.
I don't even know what the question is exactly, but I'm just curious about, if you could share just more about body and like how, being in your body, like I said, I don't know the question, but if anything like is sparked by me saying bodies, and
we were just talking about bodies, talking about in the different ways, like saying like, you know, he's a movement healer, and then I'm doing sexual liberation work, but really focusing on like CSA, and then thinking about trans bodies and how we're so denied. Just so denied or shamed or hidden. So we started from there, talking about it from there.
Yeah. So bodies, I'm actually writing a lot about this right now because I'm obsessed with like what are bodies, and I've been really thinking like even with like COVID, that our bodies are not these sealed containers we think they are. And so our bodies are so open. And they're open spiritually, they're open in terms of contaminants, they're open, right? And so knowing our bodies is also knowing their precarity, and that they're going to keep changing. That's the only thing we know for sure. They're going to keep changing, they're unpredictable. And if we don't slow down, listen to them, they will force us to do that, you know? And so I think when we come into relation, we've been talking a lot about like, you know, how do we move away from obsession with love in these normative ways and towards care? And I think a lot of that care is like caring for another body. And that means, right, you have to be caring for your body if you're going to be able to offer that. And what does that holistic care look like, right? The spiritual body, the emotional body, the physical body, the ethereal body, right? Like all of those layers, and there are like different bodies in each body. I think about this all the time. I'm like inside this body conversation. So I think and we were talking earlier today about how important like movement and sexual liberation are for trans bodies, because the biggest thing is like the fear, right? Like the public space, and how we are, I love the phrase overdetermined from without. Like we are already, like it's already decided what we are, what we're allowed to be, how we're allowed to move, how we're supposed to dress and present ourselves, lest we might experience violence or threat. And so how do we invite those spaces with each other where we get to really be in our bodies fully, where there is no zone of policing, of, you know, you need to look like this, or, you know, or I'm going to look at you a particular way if you are naked because you have this flaw and that flaw. It's like, there are no flaws, right? This is just pure presence, body. Your body is perfect because it's yours.
The funny thing saying that is yeah, I would sort of say, when you do that, you would be very surprised as to how people would behave, right? Because it probably wouldn't be the way in which you think, which makes me think too about, like, you know, sex, you know, like, and all the times when, you know, negotiating sex or play, a lot of times before you even do it, you already have an assumption about how the person has sex, right? I've been on many a panel where I see, you know, femmes, you know, femmes talking about being tops, and people are just like, I don't understand. You're a femme and a top? I don't get it. You know, and it's like, when I've been in relationships sometimes with trans masculine people, or even you know, masculine women, the ways in which people have pushed them into being tops. And so I always say this, I have had the pleasure of being with a lot of people who identified as tops solely, sometimes because people put them there, and not because they actually wanted it. And so I was able to be with them in the ways, I was able to see them. I was able to give them something that somebody else couldn't, without taking away their identity. You know? And so thinking about bodies in that way, because we think something, but once the fear is gone and stuff, you see a lot of difference. You see things that you might not have thought. People will say that they love things that you think that they wouldn't. You know? I talk trans mass people talking about loving their vaginas. Trans women saying, I love my Audi. Like, you know, like it's supposed to be this one story about how these bodies. You know?
And I think something that I love about us that we share, in terms of the way we are attracted to people, is it's never based on body. It's never based on like this idea of a body type in any way.
Although I do have a preference for bigger bodies. I'm just going to say that. Everybody who knows me knows this. But yes.
Which is also important. Yes. Yeah, but it's not, you know, there's not these, and I'm sure there's all of the work that we've done, right? It's like, it's always about energy and connection.
It is.
That's always first.
Yeah, because the other stuff to me doesn't last very much. You could always like be attracted to someone physically, but once, you know, you start talking and stuff, the physical doesn't matter to me. It's about it's good.
I love all of that. It's all like so affirming to everybody, and just reminds me of the complexity of all of us. Like we're all so complex, and also just reminds me of wholeness. Like when you said there are no flaws, Daniel, like you can just be all of who you are, and what it's like to experience that with someone in relationship, like how we don't often get that experience, or it's easy for that experience to be like cut off because of prescriptions or rules or limitations that we internalize from outside of ourselves, or, you know, other people who we're in a relationship with can make us feel like we have to be a particular way. But I love this. I feel like it just felt like an affirmation for everyone to hear what you both said. I'm just going to ask one last question, because we've been talking for a little bit. And I feel like you both have answered this already, like in a lot of what you said, but it'll just be a final question. What's your vision? What's your hope? Like, what do you imagine for yourself, you know, with as much freedom and relationship in your body? Like, what what's possible for you and also for all of us, for all of us who are trying to love ourselves and each other. Like, where do you see us going? What can this look like for us?
I just keep thinking about, again, connection, the way we connect to one another. I feel like in these last 2 to 3 years, I have really dug deep into how I connect to other people, you know, like independently and even through my work, like how you've been a part of that, Asia, you know, like let's meet other people doing work and, you know, courting other organizations and people, right? Just like, what is connection outside of, I guess, a capitalist framework, right? Like when we want to work with somebody or be with something, there's always this, I don't know, this other thing. And the thing that I keep envisioning, maybe there's no words for it, but the pictures that I see in my mind are people caring for one another. It sounds so corny. People caring for one another. I constantly see, you know, the future with Daniel and Daniel's lovers and my lovers. And I see me caring for his lovers. I want to love his lovers. You know, like it's like, it is about, if I love this human right here, I want to love the people that he loves as well. And I want to try to be in relationship with them, whatever that means. Yeah. And then try to continue forming those connections with one another. You know, it's just like, what is the one thing that we all have is that as humans is that we are looking for some sort of a connection with someone, whether it's one person, a dog, or a lover, or something. Another breathing entity to be to learn from, to care, to see you. I just keep seeing a world where we actually fucking see each other, and we actually say the things that we want, and we actually get those things that we want. Maybe this is a utopia.
Yeah. Maybe we can tell that. Yes, I want to echo all of that, 100%. And I think the other piece that I really want for us collectively, especially BIPOC people, is to allow relationships to exist in the timelines that are true for them.
Yes.
Whether that's a minute, a month, a day, a year, 50 years, like whatever is organic to that relationship. I think we'd have so much less like heartache and devastation because we come into relationships with so much expectation, you know, of like, this is going to be it, or this one's going to last really long, and then we create, you know, we invent the harm. Yeah. You know, like, you left me. It's like, well, we get to do that whenever we please. We're not, you know, we have not committed a mortal sin by doing that, by walking away for whatever reason, you know, and to let people do that because we are so invested in people living their best lives and being on their paths, and also in being left, you know, and being like, you know what, I love you. I genuinely love you so much that if that is what is best for you, I want that. And to really, I desire all of us to grow emotionally and spiritually to the place that we can do that and mean that. Which doesn't mean that we don't experience grief and pain, but we stop the projecting of like, you were supposed to be this, that, and other, therefore you are now a harm doer of mine. It's like, no, it's a way more complex than that, and we have more agency than that. We don't need to keep doing that to each other. It's actually completely necessary, and it's a choice. It is a choice. We have more choicefulness in relationships than we allow ourselves.
Yeah, that's like I would say it's such a more of an interconnected conversation, and that reverberates to a larger conversation around, as we continue to talk about, like, you know, what not having throwaway culture and, you know, all accountability. That's part of that. Right. It's like, so if you're in a relationship with someone for 2 years, do we actually throw that person fully away? Right. Or do we say, I learned these things from that relationship. These things were pretty shitty, but these were good, you know, and if there was no abuse, I know that gets complicated when abuse is a part of it, but like, taking relationships as This is part of my lesson from life. Right. And I often say that I was like, I want to love you until we can't love each other anymore, right? Yeah. But that's it, because that's the best way to do it, right? I loved you, great. Now it seems like this is not this is not good, and then we leave. So I think it's a bigger conversation about, again, how we connect to one another, accountability, throwaway culture, all of that. Because especially as, BIPOC, folks, like, our connection to one another is vital. Right. It's vital. We can't be shitting all over each other. Right. We absolutely need to be continuing to love and uplift one another. Right.
Yeah, and I would just add to what I was saying, the ability to walk away and be walked away from has to exist within a container that's not all or nothing, right? Right. Unless, there's really serious abuse and things. Like, I think we have both talked about how sad it is and how disappointed we've been in people when it's like, this doesn't work in this configuration. But that doesn't mean there wasn't love and care and other things. Let's be invested in the transformation. Right. And how that's actually really, really hard for a lot of people. And so I think that's another part of my vision. Like, let's stop being binaristic about our connections and, really be like, if we can't love each other romantically, well, then let's be family. Yeah. Let's be family long term. Like for real. Yeah. And continue to struggle together. I think that's part of not participating in throwaway culture. Like, what is our investment in each other? And it's not just about, I'm only willing to relate to you if I can relate to you this way.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like there's more opportunity to transition relationships or transform relationships into something that's more useful or aligned. You don't have to just get rid of it. And ultimately, it sounds like you're saying, and we can suffer less. Like, we don't have to suffer so hard through letting go or breakups. If you can kind of take a complete inventory of the person and the relationship, and like, there was some okay things about this, I might want to keep that part. But yeah, definitely when there's that binary, we lean into the heartache and all of that, which is, like you said, it's fine, but also it's like, it's a complete experience, right? All of that.
Yeah.
But thank you both. I feel like you both said like really important things. I'm definitely going to go back and watch this myself. This feels like a conversation that people could listen to multiple times just to really take in like what you two were saying. It feels like very wise and grounding, like ways to live, even if you're not someone who is independently polyamorous. Yeah. So I'm really grateful to you both. You have any last things you want to say to each other before we get off?
Cherub. I have all these little pet names for him. It's ridiculous. My angel, my cherub.
This is so syrupy. Like, it's just.
Well, that's the other thing. We're not against romance.
It's so sweet. I love it. I love just like seeing you two hold hands throughout this whole hour. Like,
and it's funny because I think this is a weird thing because this is something that I've withheld a lot of, in past relationships because of not knowing, and fear, just, fear. And now there's no fear here. So it's like, touch me all the time.
I love that we never shared our story, but I love that we met through Black Love Convergence.
I know,
and that we twice and too shy to approach each other.
Yes, 3 years. Yeah. Yep.
Us shy.
I was like, who's that? Didn't do anything. Yes. Mm-hmm. And when is our anniversary?
Juneteenth.
We gotta be black. Of course, we gotta be black.
Yes.
We met at Black Love Convergence. Juneteenth is our anniversary there. Black love.
Yes, I love it all. All right, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording.
All right.